Hey
And
guys, welcome to another Tuesday Tradesmen Talk. How's it going, Wilson?
going good, man. How are you?
Doing well, making some progress this week. And we talked earlier wanting to emphasize the importance of decision making during this call. So, for anyone listening, if you have struggles with analysis paralysis, or if you put maybe too much importance on making the perfect decision or waiting till the circumstances are right to make your decision, this conversation might help you a little bit put things in perspective, especially in regards to running and owning your own business. When you have a lot of things going on at the same time, sometimes it could be better to make quicker decisions rather than delaying that decision. And so, I want to go over the pros and cons of approaching that sort of decision making. So, with that said, um, what are your thoughts, Wilson, on the importance of making decisions quickly versus not?
Um, well, it's kind of a natural continuation of a topic we talked about a few weeks ago. We're talking about kind of how you're analyzing the decisions you're going to make, because a lot of people, they don't get clarity around what the decision actually is, or what the outcomes of that decision are, or what the secondary and tertiary consequences of that decision are. And so
Right.
we turn these decisions into these big monsters, and these big monsters, they're scary because we don't know what it is. And so, I think the big thing is recognizing that a lot of the decisions that we make into these big things, they're not. And because they're
Exactly.
not, we don't need to invest years and years and years and years researching something that in the grand scheme of things is not that big of a deal. It's better to make a decision and then analyze, okay, did I make a bad decision, then make a wrong decision, and course correct, right? It's easier to be moving, to go a little bit off track and come back on course, than it is to sit there and just wait till everything's perfect to try and go
Right.
somewhere.
Exactly. We talked on the last call about setting goals and creating a plan for the next 12 months. And if we take the time to actually do that and we have a clear picture of where we're going, we can make faster decisions and trust that we will get to the destination. But, no one is perfect. And oftentimes we might find ourselves maybe making the wrong decision. But once we realize that, if we have the habit of making quick decisions, we can, like you mentioned, get back on course a lot faster. And you don't have to suffer from that opportunity cost that can come from delaying that decision.
Yeah.
And a lot of decisions that you're making day to day in your business are not going to be a make or break sort of scenario. Once you have that clear vision of where you're going, you might have a step in your path of, okay, now I'm going to start online marketing. Well, the decision you may have to make is, do I start with Facebook ads? Do I start with Google ads? Do I start with organic referrals? The answer may be all of them. And so start off with one, just pick one and go for it. Analyze your results. Don't analyze the decision, and then adapt based off of what the results tell you.
Yep, 100%. Well, I think that's a good thing to distinguish between is the difference between analyzing the results and
Yeah.
analyzing the decision. Because if you're analyzing the decision, like, well, should I have done Facebook ads? It's almost the wrong question, right? Or should I have done
Right.
Google ads? The question is, did you need advertising? Yes. So
Yeah,
you may have made the right decision. You just went in the wrong direction, right?
for
And
sure.
if you did that in real life, nobody would be mad. It's like, did I need to go pick my kids up from school? Yes. Okay. So you turned left instead of right. It's not the end of the world. You
Right.
just,
Or do I take the car versus the truck?
yeah, you get back on track and you keep going. But I think a lot of it stems from the fact that, people feel like, and I know I've been guilty of this, right? My background is engineering, and a lot of engineering is problem solving, but a lot of times engineers want to have the full solution before they start working on something.
Before they do anything.
Yeah, yeah. And that definitely does not work in business, because you don't know the variables that are going to come into play later, right? So it's a lot of times.
Exactly. By the time you make your decision or take action, the circumstances may have changed. And
Yes.
if you're trying to proactively plan every minute movement, you might find yourself constantly in motion, running in circles.
Or never going anywhere at all.
Right.
I had a mentor of mine one time. He was like, you're talking about this major decision, you're trying to have everything planned out. He was like, if you were going to do a road trip from South Carolina to California, you wouldn't sit in your driveway until every light was green at the same time. And that's like,
Love that.
there's probably some wisdom in that. And I think it's tough for us because when we feel like these decisions have consequences, we want to mitigate the downside of those decisions, right? And so we're waiting to have perfect information, but there's no such thing. By the time you have perfect information, the only way to look on something with perfect information is to be looking at it in the past, right?
Exactly.
So it's like, I can tell you right now that you should go back to 2001 and buy Amazon, right? But the decision, it's too late. Now that I have perfect information, I can't buy Amazon at a price that really makes sense.
Right. And it's almost human nature to want to do that because of that avoidance of fear, the fear of making the wrong decision or the fear of the implications of making the wrong decision. And that's not exactly rational. The best business owners, the most successful CEOs, they will often tell you making quick decisions is much more valued than overanalyzing decisions and delaying the decision itself. Just looking at where you want to go, looking at the information that's presented, you do want to make an educated decision, but you don't want to delay the progress, especially if the overarching decision you're making isn't going to kill your business.
Yeah.
If someone's got a gun up against your head and they tell you choose left or right and you choose the wrong one, you're going to die. That's much more of a serious situation that you'll very unlikely be in when it comes to building your business.
Right. Yeah.
It's more like, do I hire this guy this week or next month? Or do I start ads today or tomorrow? Or do I want to wear a polo versus a t-shirt in my video ad? None of these decisions are, they may influence the results, but like we mentioned earlier, let those results come through, analyze it real quick, and then adapt to like, okay, I tried the t-shirt in this video. Let me try the polo shirt in that one.
Yep.
And then we'll compare the results and I'll let the results speak for themselves and double down on what is working.
Well, and it's one of those things with most of the decisions. And to be clear, I think it's important to spend time thinking about the overall decision, because I think people get lost in minutia, right? Like if you've made the decision you want to grow your business, that is the decision. Okay. And now you have to take action towards that decision. And then where people get lost is like, oh, well, how am I going to grow my business? And that decision all of a sudden becomes a big deal because it's unclear. It doesn't matter that much because you're right. If you get it wrong, it's not a big deal, but you also have the capacity to mitigate those damages, right?
Yeah.
If I say, hey, I'm going to do this kind of advertising, I can say, all right, well, I need to grow my business. I know in, let's say, cabinet refinishing, if we close one deal, we bring in, let's say, what, $4,000 for the business, $2,000 to $3,000, that's going to be profit. So it's like, all right, well, if that's the case, I can go spend $2,500, $500 a piece and test these 5 different things. And if all of them fail but one, if I have a 20% success rate, which is like, I'd be good at baseball with that kind of success rate, right? That's about the only thing in the world to go to 20%. If you have a 20% success rate, you are still coming out ahead. And now that mitigation
pays for the experiment.
Exactly. And so there's not as much need to think about it. But I think one of the things that people forget sometimes is as they're contemplating all of these decisions and things are going by, their competitors are actually taking action and doing those things, right? They're falling behind. And the reason they're falling behind is because not making a decision is a decision.
Exactly. There's, when you're faced with multiple choices, and if you've made an educated decision on, what you're trying to do, the choices don't necessarily matter as much. And as you pointed out, even if you don't have a huge success rate on the choice that you chose, in terms of marketing or the channel that you might use, while your competitors are doing and taking action and making 20% gain here, 30% gain there, 10% gain here, if you were trying to overanalyze that whole thing, they just completely wiped you away in comparison. So we want to just harp on this as much as we can without being too annoying. Take action.
It's annoying and you don't forget it.
Yeah, let it burn into your brain a little bit. Take action quickly, because even if you make the wrong choice, you're still progressing because you now know one thing that you don't need to do again. And
Yes.
having that clarity can distill the choices now in front of you at that point and get you closer and closer to making the best decision. It's not right or wrong. It's simply experimenting enough to make the best one.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to find that out with certainty is experimenting and taking action and deciding based off of the results, not off the proactive thinking.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I rage against college and traditional schooling a lot, primarily because I did a lot of it. Right. And
Right.
one of the things that I found to be really strange is in most things you do in life, right? If you were going to go play a new sport, actually, this is a great example. We went, my dad's incredible at tennis, phenomenal tennis player. So, we went down and visited him, and we were doing some lessons with him. And he's wiping the floor with us. It's ridiculous how much better he is. But making all of these mistakes, like just nonstop mistakes, hitting the net, over the fence, not a big deal. Nobody gets really upset. Because when you screw something up when you're practicing a new sport, people they don't go, "Oh man, you really failed to hit that ball." Right? That was a massive mistake. They're like, "Oh yeah, okay, well you didn't do that quite right. You did it a little bit better." Right? And so in certain areas of our life, like sports, messing up or failing is considered a good thing because you learn from that. But when people start getting into school or getting into business, teachers all have that big red pen. And we're kind of conditioned that if I make a mistake, it's going to be bad or it's going to be a failure. But the mistakes aren't necessarily good or bad in themselves. Like we're looking for feedback, right? We're not necessarily looking for success in any one thing. We're looking for feedback to keep us on the right track. And I think a lot of times changing that perspective makes making those quick decisions a little bit easier.
Yeah. And just changing that programming, as hard as it's going to be,
It is hard. Yeah.
that avoidance of failure is what a lot of us, as you're laying out, we're programmed to behave, to avoid failure. And in business, it's encouraged. And the more comfortable you get with that, the better you're going to be in the long term. And so if you're deciding, do I start this type of business or do I start that type of business or do I start now versus later, it doesn't matter. Just go for it. If you start a business in a trade that you may not find that you enjoy as much as you thought you would, that's fine. At least you built a business and now you can go sell it, or you can take the revenue and profits and go into something that you become interested in at that time. It's not going to be the wrong or a killing sort of decision. It's simply feedback and progress towards determining what you do want and towards the best decision.
Yep. Well, and we've had that happen. And we've had another, number of students that, started their businesses and other things like painting, right?
Right.
And, it was all right. It wasn't everything they wanted, but they were able to do that because they had their own business, because they had made that, mistake. They were able to go, well, what would be better? And ended up finding us because of that, and now have pretty successful businesses. We actually had one student, it's only happened once out of like 50. We had one person that liked actual traditional painting more than cabinetry finishing.
Yeah.
There's no accountant for taste. Just kidding, right? Painting's great. It's a little bit smaller margins, but they're both great. But
there's no loss because he does two jobs. He made his investment back. And he developed a more valuable skill that he can implement into his business, maybe hire someone to do those type of jobs for him.
100%.
He could still pivot it into a win.
When you look at how they view it, right, that's the important thing. It was like, when we talked, he was like, no, I'm really happy because this is what got me into having my own business, which was the ultimate decision that I wanted, right?
Yeah.
So it's not this individual step, it's the grand scheme of things. And so, I think people probably make a lot quicker decisions if they could zoom out a little bit, right?
Right.
And that's something I think is really big in any business is having the perspective to go, hey, this individual decision is not a big deal.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to create that plan and create that clear vision and break it down into a step-by-step so you can just approach each step. Okay, you have a few different choices you can select on how to get to the next one. Just take one and go.
Yep.
and you'll find that over time you'll make progress.
Yep. Well, and to kind of piggyback off of what we talked about last week, which is the idea that you have to have you have to have that period of planning. You have to have that period of reflection. What I think is really valuable for people, and this kind of fits into that, because let's say at the beginning of every quarter, I've got my planning period. So I plan, I go, okay, this is what we want to have happen this next quarter. During that quarter, I don't need to be spending a whole bunch of time planning. I don't need to be spending a whole bunch of time going, well, what is the very best next thing? I need to be taking action and making mistakes, and then go look back and go, okay, of all these different mistakes I made, which one was the closest to where I wanted to go, right?
And people will be surprised how often they're right. In, like they say, even in test taking, the first choice you make usually is the right one. And statistically, most people who change their choices on a test usually change it to the wrong answer. We have a natural intuition within us that often takes in information that we can't necessarily perceive easily, but it's there. There's an internal decision-making process that we all go under. And when you get presented information, if you have an inclination to lean one way or the other, just go with your intuition and take action.
Yep.
Especially with business building, you're likely to make improvements. They may not be huge improvements, but you're usually better off just making the decision. You're not likely to lose a bunch of money. And so just go for it.
Well, dude, that's actually such a great point, because it's a bunch of micro decisions, but people wonder when you're going back to sports, right? When you're playing against somebody that's way better than you, or when I go to the gym and I'm watching somebody lift way more than me, and I think to myself, I'm like, man, how much is this guy training, right? They must be just in here all the time, but it's not true, right? Because over a long period of time, people forget how much micro decisions will actually add up in your favor, right?
Right.
Like if I work out 4 days a week and you work out 5 days a week, it's like, oh yeah, they both work out. But at the end of a year, you've worked out 50 more times than I have.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a significant change in the overall results. And so, all these little decisions that you're learning from and making, right? It may be a lot of failures, but it takes those failures to find those really, really valuable pieces in the middle. But you can make those failures and build things as failures, but just feedback experiences.
Exactly. I 100% agree.
Yeah, I really like the slight edge theory, because even if somebody listens to this would just say, okay, I'm going to go commit to making, I'm going to go out there and try one new thing a week, right? And it may be a minor thing. I'm going to try one new thing a week. But this week I'm going to try Facebook posting and I'm going to boost it, right? Next week I'm going to try running Facebook ads for $50 for a week and see if anybody bites, right? Just the act of testing those little things, even if you're only doing one a week, when you compare that to somebody that does one a month, you're going to find at the end of the year, you're so far ahead of them.
Right.
And the cost is not going to be anywhere close to the gain, so long as you're not doing anything ridiculous.
And it's even good. It's a good mental habit or character trait to instill in your team as well.
Yes.
If you have employees or partners, having everyone on the team on board with the idea of making decisions quickly will often create progress as a whole, not only in terms of building the business, but also in terms of operating the business. I know with our companies, we have employees that are working in these homes, and they're often faced with these micro decisions. And if they are too scared or fearful of making the wrong one, they will often avoid making it at all. Mm-hmm. And that usually becomes the bigger problem.
Yes.
And they will find themselves in a situation that easily could have been avoided. For example, there's a spec on, we do cabinet refinishing. For those who are listening, our guys are spraying cabinets. There might be a speck in the middle of that cabinet door, and they have to make the decision of taking care of it or not. And by avoiding how to take care of it, do I respray the door, or do I try to buff it out, or do I do this or that? If they avoid making that decision and just leave it there, it's often going to create more time, more of a hassle, because they have to go back and fix it. Now, there is an overarching decision. Do I fix it or not? And that's a whole nother topic of discussion as far as pride in your work and quality control and things like that. But as far as how best to approach it, if they're like, oh, boss, I called you and you didn't answer, or the manager didn't answer. And so I didn't know what to do. So I didn't do anything. And that often is, is the
Yeah.
wrong decision. Doing something, either communicating it with the homeowner or approaching the challenge in any way you best know how to, is usually the best approach.
Yeah. So here's an interesting question, because obviously, being an engineer, I really like frameworks and systems.
Yeah.
How do you train your guys on that? What is the framework for decision making that you try and impart on them? Because I assume there's got to be a budget limit, right? If he's making a $4,000 decision, you probably want some feedback. If he's making a $4 decision, I prefer my phone not ring. How do you process that?
Well, I try to align incentives. And so the better we can enable our employees or our team to manage themselves, the better.
Yeah.
And the way we can do that is by incentivizing the right behavior. And so how I do that is my technicians are fully responsible for that job. And so if they decide not to address a flaw in their work, they are the ones that have to go back and fix it, which means they're spending more time without any additional pay. And it also, if they don't fix it that day versus, the next day, it de-incentivizes them, because that means they're not getting their paycheck as soon as they could have. And so they're delaying their paycheck. And so they're either losing money or they are losing time. And those two things they value to some extent. And so you try to hit them on both ends of that. Some people prioritize money over time, which is fine. But if you incentivize them on both ends, you have a likelihood of getting the behavior that you're looking for.
Do you have a budget that you work with your guys? Like, hey, if you got a problem that you think is going to be more than this, then you need to reach out first, or are they just, hey, you handle it?
Yeah, I don't really have a budget, unless they damage something in the house. Most things don't require their money to be spent on repairing things, unless it's like maybe a little tool here or there. Um, if it's due to their mistake, they often will be responsible for paying for whatever they had to go. Like, let's say they forgot hinges. They may have to go and buy hinges that night, or they were short when they counted out hinges, and I will reimburse them.
Sure.
But most things are more time oriented than money oriented when it comes to repairing things or getting the quality of work that we're looking for.
Okay.
But I
Yeah.
just try to incentivize them to make the right decisions. And so if they're delaying a job, it's going to affect them. If they are cutting corners, it's going to affect them.
Yep.
And so they want to do it right the first time.
Yeah. I think that's there's something to be said for the culture of hey, we solve problems, and creating that and pushing that. Yeah, every business is different. We've had a couple, like we have businesses where there's a customer service portion, right? And
Yep.
customer complains, they want a refund for XYZ, or they want this service to be come out and provided for free. And one of the things we've always tried to do with different employees over the years is, these are the most common problems we're going to see, or these are the issues you're going to run into, right?
Mhm.
Here's your guide on how to solve those issues. And unless this thing becomes more than a $400 problem or a $300 problem, don't talk to me about it, right? Like, I believe in you. I trust you. You're capable. If you weren't, you would not be at this company, right? And letting them know that. And that's not like a thing I say, it's a thing I mean. I would never bring somebody in that I think is incompetent, because what was the point of me bringing them in if that's the case? And if you
Right.
find yourself consistently working with incompetent people, like, they're not the problem. if the same thing keeps happening around you all the time, there's a decent chance that you are the source of that issue,
Right.
which is not fun, but it's the truth. Same with decision making, right?
Yeah, taking responsibility over everything in the business is just a good perspective to have,
Yes,
because it allows you to look for ways you can change the results
100%.
rather than just blaming it on the new hire or blaming it on, something outside of yourself. if you can take responsibility over it, you usually can discover a way where you can influence the results.
Yep. Well, and I think to kind of tie a bow on it, coming after last week's talk about how to prepare for 2022, once you've made that plan, you really want to start diving in, making really quick decisions, take 100% responsibility for those decisions, but recognize the vast majority of the decisions that you're making on the path to your greater goal are not going to be big decisions. And when one of those giant decisions comes up, you will know. Everything else in between that, you should look at it as an opportunity for feedback, right? They're quick little learning experiences. And over time, you're going to get better, right? You're going to get much better at looking at it and going, nope, this is a good decision. This is not a good decision. One of the things you see when you hang around with business guys that are just, absolute rock stars, guys that have done, 50, $100 million, is they're like, yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Right.
And how do you know? It's like, I've made enough bad decisions in the past that I have an instinct here.
And they trust themselves.
They trust themselves.
One thing I'd like to add to kind of this conclusion is to avoid feeling like you have to have confirmation from everyone around you before you decide.
Yes.
I see this a lot where people want to explain their decision making to everyone around, and they almost try to convince the person to agree with them.
Right.
But no one is going to have as much context as you as the business owner. So you're asking someone with a very limited perspective to kind of dictate what you do in your business, which may or may not be true, but you don't necessarily need to get the affirmation from everyone for you to feel confident in your own decision making or for you to trust yourself. If you're asking people, that might be a sign that you don't exactly trust yourself as much, which is okay, but it is important to acknowledge that, because that's something you can develop over time as well. You have a gut instinct on most things. And when you get the information and you have an idea of what you should do, that is what you should do.
Yes.
And someone else might do exactly what you're doing and get different results on some things, and that's okay. But there's a reason you were presented that decision. There's a reason you have all the information in front of you. Don't overanalyze everything. Let the results speak for themselves, and then analyze those results in a way that can help you have clarity on where you should go next.
Well, especially one of the things that brings up that I think is really interesting is when you're looking at business, everyone in the world is going to have an opinion on what happen in your business. A lot of them won't have context for those opinions. A lot of them don't really have a place for those opinions. A lot of them are looking for "I told you so's," which are absolutely useless in the marketplace. It's worthless. And a lot of people are looking for "I told you so's." When you succeed, they're not going to say anything. Quick story: we had somebody come out recently that they're telling their family members about this new cabinet business thing they were going to do, right? Their family member didn't watch any of our videos, didn't look at any of the stuff, didn't go to the website, nothing. Was like, you shouldn't start that. That's a stupid business. And I was like, well, you have a job right now. I was like, yeah. Like, you're in the trades. He goes, yeah. I said, if you told her that you were going to start a business doing exactly what you do right now, what do you think she'd say? He was like, oh, she'd say not to do it. But you're working for somebody else. So obviously this business works. Is your boss starving? They know he makes really good money, right? Like, that person does not have context.
Right.
They can't have context. Asking someone else that, you've never sit down with a stranger next to a bus and be like, hey man, what do you think I should do in my relationship? Right? they're just not there. Right. And your business is going to be as personal as your relationship, right? It's literally going to be the way you feed your family. Right. And so letting somebody else have input on that, if they don't have the ability or the context, or more importantly, if they don't have a successful track record of doing that, that would be a bad.
That's a good distinction. It's good to ask for help and it's good to ask for input, but make sure those people are doing what you want to do or are beyond that.
Yeah.
Make sure they have credential to give valid advice and they have the context and the experience that is of value to you.
Well, it's kind of funny. You never ask a homeless person for financial advice, but lots of people are willing to ask their employed friends for advice on running their business.
Right.
And not that, not that employed is the same as homeless, but it's the point that the context isn't there, right? They're living two different experiences.
100% agree. So I think those are some good points I believe that could help people with decision making coming into this next year. Create that plan, create those steps. And then when you're pressed with those decisions to make, take the information and go. And then let the results speak for themselves. And so I hope that was of value to you guys. If you have any questions on that topic or anything else, shoot us over an email at support@cabinetstartup.com. We'll be happy to get back to you. And we'll see you guys next week.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great one.